So, ladies and gentlemen, as part of our curious little journey celebrating 50 years of the National Theatre, which is only a week and a day away to that celebration, I'm delighted that we welcome for the first time as part of this project one of our former artistic directors, Sir Trevor Nunn, and one of his close collaborators even now, Patricia Hodge. Ladies and gentlemen. So, up until now, we have been confined to the shed. We have now moved up to the Olivier Theatre. How fitting. We didn't know whether to put Trevor up there, but we decided to be a little more modest.
I was going to be a suppliant at his feet.
Indeed. Metaphorically, of course. So, for those of you who've been part of this already, you'll know it's a sort of National Theatre Desert Island Discs. I take the role of Roy Plumley. Sort of looks a bit like sand, actually, rather good. And
is that why you've got the stick?
Indeed, to help me get off the island, I tell you. And we go through the same 10 questions. If you heard them before, they are the same questions, and we increasingly having different answers. But I hope this is number 7. We're now building up a wonderful picture of people's memory for the last 50 years, and we're capturing all of that, which is rather wonderful. So, Patricia and Trevor, let us begin at the beginning. I've got your answers here, so if you need prompting, don't worry, I've got them here. We'd like to go right back to your very first, we've said first encounter with the National Theatre, be it watching a play or visiting or coming for a meeting. Patricia, would you tell us what you first found the National Theatre?
Well, when it was a company looking for a building, and it was housed in the Old Vic, and I went from school and saw Peter O'Toole's Hamlet, yeah.
The very first production in the Old Vic. And do you remember that as being a inspiring production, or did you think, I want to be part of this company?
Well, I mean, that would have been a long shot at that point, gosh. It was, I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen Hamlet before, let alone anything on that scale, let alone anything of that dimension, you know, so it was going right to the top straight away.
Absolutely. Trevor, when did you first come across the National?
My first connection, too, was going to the Old Vic. I think the production I saw was The Recruiting Officer, with a brilliant production by Bill Gaskell with Maggie Smith and Bob Stevens. And it had a sort of slightly Brechtian ingredient, and it felt like something of a new style had arrived. But actually before that, I was doing my first professional engagement at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, and 2 or 3 of the younger actors in the company got very excited that they had got auditions for possibly joining the National Theatre Company. And they came to me and said, will you rehearse our audition? So one of them got in. I can't remember her second name. She was called Jean, and she, I think, played walk-on parts at the National Theatre for a while. But I have to tell you that in those early days at the Old Vic, the National struggled to fit into that building. It was a large organisation, and there was no office space. And consequently, the offices were located in a kind of Nissen hut, corrugated iron Nissen hut, in a place called Aquinas Street, quite close by. And in the early days of the National, I mean, bizarrely, when I was very young, I was appointed to be the artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, which was the National Theatre's main opposition. And the Arts Council insisted that the director of the National Theatre and the artistic director of the RSC should meet once a year to discuss repertoire. And therefore, on 3 extraordinary occasions, I was in a Nissen hut with Laurence Olivier, talking about repertoire. And on the very first occasion, he said, well, you go first. And I ran through the 7 or 8 things that we'd set up, and he looked at me and he just said, you bastard.
But you got the plays.
Yes. But, well, we became very good, well, not close friends, but good acquaintances on that basis. He was very, very, very delightful and very kind to me.
Wonderful. Now, this is a very large organisation now, and always has been in many ways, and one of the questions we're looking at is examining the people who are not necessarily at the centre of the stage, unsung heroes that can be from anywhere elsewhere in the building. You've got quite an extensive list, Patricia.
Yeah, well, I think we both agree on the stage door is...
I mean, the stage door. You must have heard that many times.
Linda is winning hands down, for those of you following the whole series.
Linda
She's doing
Carol.
fine.
Carol was also very important.
And Vincent.
And Vince.
Yes.
They're doing very well.
Yeah, they are the keys to the gateway, aren't they? But I think the literary department should take a bow, actually. I think that must be an incredibly interesting place to work, and I think the programming is obviously one of the most vital parts of the running of the place. And I'd really like to single out above everybody the press office, who I sort of think would never, of course, being blowing the trumpet of everybody else, are never ever going to blow their own trumpet, so I'll do it for them. I think it's an invidious position for them to be in. The whole heart of this building, the whole reason for this building is a sort of utopian thing that press shouldn't come anywhere near it, and yet they have to do it, they have to sell it, they have to get approval on a wider stage, and I think to filter that and make it work for everybody and walk into a rehearsal room when they know that the last person that anybody wants to see is a member of the press office, then I think they're wonderful, and it's because it's Lucinda and Mary and all their team, and they're the nicest people in the world.
And in the right way, protective of the work and the people who do it.
Absolutely.
I've always sensed that's a very important part of their job, and keeping people at bay.
Trevor, you're keeping very quiet.
No, I'm not keeping quiet at all. I'm attentively waiting for your choices to finish. But no, indeed, the stage door, because they were wonderfully welcoming and nurturing during my time here, and each time I come back, I get a wonderful welcome there, and that's really special. But no, my choice is of somebody who spans three regimes. Somebody who was here working at the time of Richard Eyre, which was a thrilling time for the National, and then throughout my period of time, and then on up to the present day under Nick. And that's a gentleman called Porrick Cusack. Now, you all know the name Cusack because of Sinead, well, because it's a great dynasty, a great theatre dynasty. But Porrick is the young brother of that family. And during my time, Porrick's job definition was head of planning. And it was, the job he performed was like a kind of perpetual three-dimensional chess, dealing with three auditoria, dealing with potentially squabbling directors about how many performances their shows are being given, about when they were to open, about how the repertoire was to be organized, about which actors were to be in which buildings at any given time. And Porrick was absolutely extraordinary in human terms in solving all of those, to the point where nobody ever really realized there was a potential crisis. Well, in mathematical terms, he just did that task superbly. And then latterly, his job is associate producer, and he's become responsible for UK touring, and I think quite a lot of international touring of the company. We don't get any publicity about Porrick Cusack, but he is so close to the centre of things and being a sine qua non, and therefore I recommend his name to you.
Yeah, quite right. For a time he was my manager, and in terms of how he looks after people, humanity of it is really wonderful. So I think we all who've worked with him have had really, really great experiences with him. So I just absolutely agree with you on that. Moving back on stage, if we may, I hate to do it, a single individual performance, perhaps one you've been on stage with, or you've directed, or you've seen here at the National Theatre that stands out. Patricia, your choice.
Yes, well, I mean, by definition, you're going to upset absolutely everybody that you don't mention in this category. But funnily enough, I mean, for me, theatre is made up of many things, but it's also made up of moments that are absolutely unforgettable. And it's certainly one in recent memory that I would cite that I know I will never forget as long as I live. And funnily enough, it's going to look like an unoriginal thought because Nick Heitner mentioned this the other night. I happened to be at the Cheltenham Literary Festival when he was talking. And it's Richard Griffiths in The History Boys, the moment that he's giving the poetry lesson, when that extraordinary thing happened that the entire theatre, he dared to do it quietly. He dared to do it at the level that he would have been speaking to the boy in the classroom. And the entire Littleton Theatre leant forward like this and listened to this lesson, and we were all having the lesson at the same moment, and I think it was a thing of great beauty for me.
And affects those boys who were in that originally, you know, it's changed all their lives. They were on stage with that as an early experience. Extraordinary, extraordinary. Thank God it's caught on film. I know it's not the same, but at least there's something of a record of it. Trevor, may I turn to you on the same matter?
Yeah, well, I could say Laurence Olivier in Long Day's Journey into Night, which was where the National Theatre performed for a while at the New Theatre, and I saw him do that, and it was amazing. I mean, one of the great classic performances. And I could say Paul Schofield in Amadeus, which again was just a thrilling and kind of unexpected bit of acting from Schofield at that moment in his career. But I'm going to be just that much more selfish, and therefore my actual nomination is a good deal more recent. I'm going to say Henry Goodman as Shylock in Merchant of Venice, that we did at the Cottesloe Theatre. And I say it because I think Henry achieved something so rare and unusual. He made us completely revalue the play, totally revalue that character. He made it possible to see the play in a totally different light, I think, from how it had been seen before. And in a sense, I can prove it by telling you a story that there's a very well-respected critic, a man called David Nathan, who used to write for national newspapers. And as he grew older, he wrote for the Jewish Chronicle. And when it was announced that the National Theatre was going to be doing Merchant of Venice, he wrote an article, and it was very heartfelt, and he said he totally opposed the notion that this disgustingly anti-Semitic play should be part of the repertoire at the National Theatre. Surely, he said, the time has come for us to be finished with it. It's a horrible play, and no more. David Nathan came to see Henry in The Merchant of Venice, and to his eternal credit, he wrote an article of similar length that began, I was wrong, I was totally wrong. And he talked about Henry in terms of being able at last to understand Shylock, sympathize with Shylock, see the choices that Shylock was trying to make, understanding that Shylock was going wrong, but why he was going wrong, and all the pressures on him that led him to be so vilified. And I think that was an amazing individual achievement by an actor in this building.
Clive Rhodes chose the same performance in his, interestingly, for this part of the category. But he also talked about it technically, and I remember it as being such a wonderfully precise performance. Every turn and change was so beautifully modulated and delivered every night. I remember watching it regularly, and it moved up here as well, didn't it?
It did eventually move up here, as many Cottesloe productions have done over the decades. And yes, that was one of them.
Yes.
And he achieved exactly the same thing up here as he did in the small theatre. And then you were talking about shows being caught on film. Thank heavens, Henry's Shylock was televised, as so many wonderful performances in this building were not.
Yeah, indeed. Of your own work here, what's the most fulfilling production you've been part of, Patricia?
Well, you see that I don't think I've ever done anything in this building that didn't make me want to shout for joy, because it's the place all of us want to be most. So that's difficult. What I'd like to do actually is cite, and truly this is not because Trevor's sitting here, but the moment at which the ensemble was formed, because the National Theatre did, I mean, what is the National Theatre? But it did start off as being a company, and I felt that was the moment that we got back to that. And of course it can't, it's too rarefied, it's too special to that group of people that have got an opportunity that's beyond what the rest of Equity can have. But I tell you, for that brief shining moment, it was really, really wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful, the cross-casting and the sense of camaraderie and the sense that everybody was in it together.
And such a strong body of work.
Yes, yeah, well, that's right. I mean, the repertoire for it was wonderful, and that's the very repertoire that Merchant of Venice was in.
And
it was indeed.
Your performance in Money, Patricia, I remember being pretty hysterical. I mean,
a bit potty.
Yeah, but top comedy in the Olivier.
Like potty.
Just beautiful, and I mean, just so witty. And didn't you get a prize for it?
I did get a prize for it. Yeah.
Yes, quite right. Quite right.
Yeah. That was the one when my then 11-year-old son, when he heard that I'd been nominated, said, "Oh, that's great, Mum. What's the nomination for?" I said, "Money." He said, "Oh, brilliant, Mum. Fantastic. How much?"
And you got a little statuette. There you go. Trevor, a similar.
Well, it really now is going to look like Patricia and I have been talking off stage, but we declared our answers quite independently and long ahead of time. But yes, for me, the most totally satisfying piece of work in this building was Summerfolk, a production that came sort of at the climax of the ensemble, or the first ensemble year that Patricia's talking about. And indeed, she was very wonderful in that production of Summerfolk. But yes, I say it for the same reason, that it was a great ambition or great determination of mine to make an ensemble work here, and we felt that it was an ensemble that could be responsible for two of the stages. So we worked in the Olivier and in the Cottesloe, and then actors coming in on an ad hoc basis were performing at the Littleton. And it was terribly important to make sure that everybody in the building felt that there wasn't, as it were, a priority for the ensemble, or that was the only project that was really being looked after. But the fact of the matter is that as that season developed, Trellis and Cressida and the same company doing Trellis and Cressida then did the wonderful Leonard Bernstein musical Candide, and that was something else that was a huge bee in my bonnet. That it's madly inappropriate that critics should say there is a dividing line between legitimate theatre and the illegitimate theatre which involves music, and never the twain shall meet, and musical theatre is not appropriate for the repertoire of a major company. And there we were doing Turnus and Cressida and Candide with the same group of people, and it was a thrilling time in the building, and both productions were delivered, I think, at the very highest quality. And nobody had to say, well, Candide was all right, but, you know, I mean, they were really only actors. No, I mean, Simon Russell Beale showed everybody that he could sing the house down. And a young boy called Danny Evans, who'd never sung before, was absolutely sensational as Candide, and so on and so on. But the test of that ensemble came when we did the great Gorky play, Summerfolk. Why? Because Gorky wrote it for the Moscow Art Theatre. He wrote it for Stanislavski's ensemble. And therefore, he wrote it in a way as an expression of Stanislavski saying there are no small parts, there are only small actors, that you know, absolutely everybody who came into that Summerfolk environment had to deliver a performance of total believability, total character detail, and therefore had to be working at the very highest level and exchanging at the very highest level. And I think we got pretty close to it. I mean, and so I vastly regret that that was a piece of work that was never filmed, never televised. It exists only in the memory, but I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think we got there.
Patricia, would you concur with that Summerfolk experience?
Oh, it was extraordinary. We used to sit in. It was very long. We used to sit in the wings. We used to sit in the wings over there all and go, oh God, we've still got another act to go. But I mean, we loved every moment of it. Make no mistake. And it
That's
was
the other version of ensemble.
No, we're just looking forward to getting the drink at the end of the evening. But it did. I think it was one of the first examples that I can think of that idea of making theatre almost filmic. It was almost like an Ingmar Bergman film that was unfolding in theatrical terms in front of our eyes. And now, of course, you know, that seems to be more the case than not.
It was a beautiful use of the room.
Yeah,
Really looked
and that Christopher Oram set. And, yeah.
Okay, the ones that got away. So production that you missed because it was before your time or you just didn't see it that you wish you'd caught, Patricia?
Well, actually, it's been mentioned. I mean, I wish I'd seen Amadeus. I was in love with Paul Scofield forever. And that I wish I'd seen.
And you also mentioned Royal Hunt of the Sun.
Well, I did for similar reasons. I mean, these were big, sort of wonderful theatrical presentations that I think were an event in their own right. And those are the things that you wish you'd seen. So that's my
So
answer.
You missed two Peter Schaffers. I'm
I
sure
did.
he would take it personally, but
and Trevor, what did you miss?
Again, I could make a very long list, but the one that I've chosen is for personal reasons as well as reasons to do with theatre legend. And that was Peter Hawes' production of Harold Pinter's play No Man's Land with Sir John Gielgud and Sir Ralph Richardson. And of course, those two performances went into theatre legend, and occasionally you see little snippets of it that were recorded, and they were both extraordinarily brave, extraordinarily unlike anything that had been expected of them. It was just a major statement of belief of the two great classical actors, two of the great classical actors of the age, saying they were going to do a play by the most contemporary of dramatists, Harold Pinter. It was an extraordinary gesture, as much as anything. But how I came to miss it, I was constantly in Stratford-upon-Avon. We then took the company over to Los Angeles, and therefore I contrived to miss it. It galls me dreadfully because the relationship between Peter Hall as director and Harold Pinter as writer, I think, should stand as one of the greatest and most important artistic relationships of the last 50 years. Peter did world premiere after world premiere after world premiere of Harold's work, and that they became extraordinarily interdependent collaborators. And I witnessed it firsthand. I was very, very early in my RSC career. I was the assistant director on the first production ever of The Homecoming. Watching Peter, Harold sitting in the corner of the room and just witnessing the exchange between those two, and how Peter made that very difficult play cohere. And I saw him do it again and again at RSC. And then, of course, here it was Betrayal, which we know is a thing of genius, no Man's Land. I mean, a wonderful extension of Harold's career happening here. So I dreadfully lament that I didn't see it in the flesh.
It's been chosen quite a lot. It's absolutely up there, people missing it. On a slightly lighter note, costume. We mentioned beautiful design in here, but if you had to choose one costume that perhaps you might have to wear or you can just enjoy, what would you choose, Patricia?
Well, I think it'd be hard to pass beyond Little Night Music and what the costumes we were given to wear in that, which were pretty special.
There was something, your first one, where you were sort of in
Remind me.
in some kind of dressing gown job, you're having breakfast, and you came up, I think, up the drum revolve and it was just beautiful, really, really beautiful.
I like the way you're remembering this better than me.
Well, you had lovely country wear, but it was just so elegant, and it suited you. It was so beautifully designed for you and for the elegance and for the slight coldness of her life. It was all in there, all in that costume. Yeah. Very beautiful on the purple. I think you were in grey. I just remember that first image of you. It was chilling and wonderful.
Thanks so much. I think there are very few production photographs, actually, of it. I think...
really?
Well...
Why?
Well, they must be somewhere. I think Michael Lepore Trench has probably got them.
I know where there's a really lovely one of you in it, so we'll find it. Don't you worry.
Thank you so much.
Trevor, your costume choice.
It's just more difficult for me, isn't it? Since there's nothing that I actually wore during my time at the National Theatre. It would have been very, very worrying if I was able to admit that. No, I think my choice is going to be the best fancy dress choice of all, and I'm going to wear the costume of the cat that made several appearances in Tom Stoppard's The Coast of Utopia. But partly because if I wore it, I could be completely anonymous, and at this party, I could insult anybody I liked. I could adulate anybody I liked. I could rub up against anybody I liked. And nobody would know that it was me. And nobody would know what on earth this character was meant to represent. And that would be fine, because when audiences came to see Coast of Utopia, I think they didn't know either. It was a wonderful bit of symbology by Tom, and we would occasionally ask him, but what does the cat really mean, Tom? Well, it's sort of. I'm not absolutely sure. So even that most articulate of men, Tom Stoppard, couldn't quite define why a strange orange cat appeared from time to time.
I'm more inclined to give this fancy dress party as it goes on. You want to see David Bradley dressed as Diana Rigg in jumpers.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I do. Very,
Just as a
very
cat,
much
you
so.
could rub up all the like that. Lovely. In the National Theatre, obviously it's a huge, imposing building. Is there a certain place within the building that is very special to you, Patricia?
Well, yes, it's actually just over there. There is a sort of, there's one of those strange, what would one call it? Is it a vomitory of sorts?
No, the voms down there.
The voms are there, but anyway, there's a place you can come through the pass door, and it's some sort of entry, but once the house is in, nobody's going to come through. And if you hide carefully in the shadows, you can actually see at least 50% of the stage, and you can get the sense of being in the auditorium at the same time without them seeing you. And for example, when I love to feel connected with something before ever I've come on stage. I think you sort of don't want to come on cold in any way. And when I was doing Dark Materials, the opening of it was so exciting because the audience's excitement was so palpable. There was children in there that had never, ever been in a theatre in their lives. And so I wanted to kind of get that, and then the show would start, and I wanted to be part of their excitement as this wonderful, the tree opened up and all the things happened and the music went. And so I used to come and watch the first 15 minutes from that spot, every performance.
So it's actually where that little running man sign is. If you just go down those stairs ever so slightly.
That's it, and just tuck in there where there's stairs.
Because mine's actually over
the same one there.
Yeah, that's the platforms one where I've watched so many a platform from there. But it's also, when you have platforms, it's also quite fun. That's often where the company come en masse. So you look and you see 20 people gathered in that place trying to watch the show, the platform about the show they're in. So you're not alone in there.
No, fine.
Trevor, where...
I thought I'd found it.
Where?
I'm tempted to say that it's the director's box at the back of the Olivier, just back there, because it's wonderfully soundproofed, and you can sit in there and you can expleet the night away as things aren't going quite as you want to. You can also have a bottle of wine in there, and no one's going to bother you. So that was a very nice spot. But actually, if I tell you, I think my very, very favorite spot is completely unknown to the general public, and I would reckon fairly unknown to a lot of people who work in the building. There is a staircase that goes down through the building between the Olivier and the Littleton foyer. And nobody ever uses it. I'm sure that just occasionally crew carry something down there, but for the most part, people use the public access staircases, and it's an extraordinary place because when you're on that staircase, you can feel part of the whole huge enterprise. You can sense the building. You sense that the Olivier is just up there and the Littleton's just down there. You're quite close to the hub of everything. On the other hand, you also feel completely alone. You know there is virtually no possibility of anybody passing you there to interrupt your thought process. So I would occasionally go there in the knowledge that there would be no telephone call interruptions, there would be no tap on the door, there would be no passers-by, there would be nothing that I could hear in the corridor outside. I could just go and have a good think down there. So that would be my spot.
Nicknamed the Royal Staircase because it was meant to connect the VIP room to the Olivier, but it didn't quite go down far enough, so it was unusable by royalty. Hence why it's full on Lasdun design. There's no kind of backstageness. It's kind of got the proper Lasdun design, but unusable by royalty. Thank goodness. Who knew?
I did my best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's waiting. All right, we give you a little treat now at the end of this exercise. We'd like to offer you your ideal fantasy day programming. We have a morning, an afternoon, and an evening slot to fill with a show, and they can give you the most delightful day of National Theatre programming. Patricia, what would your morning show be?
Well, this is so difficult. Okay, my three choices are all based on very much big company shows, because that to me is the most exciting thing that the National can produce.
Harking to ensemble in many ways.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. I would make the morning one probably after the dance, because that just, I thought that was the most beautifully conceived and beautifully acted production that just took you into a moment in time. From that, I just remember the curtain swishing across, and then the curtain on the stage, and then you were taken into this extraordinary. And I'd like to be taken there for 2.5, 3 hours, whatever it is. Do you want me to go on? Or are we now going to
we'll have Trevor's morning show.
Oh, I thought we did all three.
I will take direction.
Go on, do your whole day.
We'll have all of Patricia's day.
Okay,
all right, so it's matinee. Okay,
so
after
now it's matinee, and it would have to be The Wind in the Willows, because when that first started, my children were too young to see it, but by the time it had been on for a while, I thought, I've got to see this, and I know they're too young, but I'm going to take them to see it. And my little one was barely 3 years old. And I don't know, when I think now, the audacity of it, but I just thought, I've got to see it. And he sat on my knee, and when the lights came up at the back, and these little figures appeared, and he went, "Look, Wabbit, Wabbit." And he never moved from that moment. He did not move for 3 hours. And I thought, I mean, I know I started them young, but that was a good way to start. It was magical. It was so magical. So that would be my afternoon.
It also contains a Michael Bryant classic, which lives in my memory, The Badger.
Yes.
He was made for many roles, but
the
who
Badger.
knew he was made to play Badger?
And he knew he stood on his sweet spot all the time. Michael had a
the Bryant spot.
The Bryant, yes, exactly. And the evening would be, well, this is a little bit controversial of me, because this is not actually a National Theatre production, but I love the National Theatre for doing it, for saying we must bring, every now and again, we must bring the best of what there is out there in the world, that we can all share in it and enjoy it, and say that we're all, at the end of the day, we're one world. And that is August Osage County, which I thought was an absolutely staggeringly wonderful piece of work. I mean, just makes you cry, because that's what, that's the sort of theatre that I joined for. And
out of an ensemble company, Steppenwolf, which is exactly what you were talking about, that kind of
relationship. And that's where you feel, hands touch across many continents, really.
Yeah, and it's all right. Adrian Lester chose it as his morning show as well. So
as his morning show?
Yeah, so you're in good company there.
Right, okay.
Yes. So, Trevor, let's begin your day then.
Well, my choices are very, very different from Pat's. In fact, couldn't be more opposite in terms of large scale to small scale. My morning is going to be watching Ken Campbell do his one-man show, The History of Comedy, Part 1, Ventriloquism. Ken did a number of shows at the National Theatre. He was very, very great friends with Richard Eyre, and that's where the relationship started. And then he did 2 during my time here. And Ken is the most extraordinary individual. I mean, a clown, a grotesque, a kind of walking commedia dell'arte character, brilliantly intellectual, brilliantly insightful, a wonderful writer. And his one-man shows, he managed to be sort of, to some extent, a stand-up, and to some extent, somebody who was doing an extraordinary play that had thematic development. But I choose that particular one, The History of Comedy, because he came to my office one day and he said, I think I've got a new show, but I need to audition it. And I said, how do you mean? And he said, I need to audition it to you. And can we, can you give me a time and I'll come in and do it? And I think probably 2 days later, we met in rehearsal room 4. I think it no longer exists. I think it's an office or something. No, wasn't it? up at the top of the building. And I sat alone in this rehearsal room as Ken Campbell went through this extraordinary clown show. And occasionally he would stop and say, "What do you think? Does that work? What do you reckon?"
That works.
I mean, a completely indelible experience, a great artist. So he's my morning.
Brilliant.
My afternoon is going to be taken up with what I think of as the greatest production of a modern play that I have ever seen. And that is the production by my colleague Howard Davies of the Arthur Miller play, All My Sons. Howard has an insight into that play. I've seen the play a number of times in different productions, but never so powerfully, never so overwhelmingly as when Howard has directed it. And it started in the Cottesloe, and then we brought it up into the Littleton, and then more recently Howard has done the same production again in the West End, and I can never tire of it. It's a sensational bit of work that allows you to understand that Arthur Miller is a latter-day Ibsen, but he's also like a Greek tragedian, and something overwhelming happens when I watch that production. So now I'm in a very somber mood,
Absolutely,
and therefore I need to perk myself up a bit. And consequently, it's a very, very selfish choice, my evening choice, but you know, I need to get right up there on a high, and therefore I am going to watch the production we did on this stage of Cole Porter's Anything Goes.
That's one I struggled with.
And I'm going to do that because as I watch it, I will be reminding myself that everyone in that cast, later on in the day or tomorrow or yesterday, is also the cast of Love's Labour's Lost by William Shakespeare. So once again, we did the ensemble where we proved that you can do a complex Shakespeare and you can bring all of that discipline of language and the creation of character to Cole Porter, and those same artists brought all of that understanding of rhythm and melody and lyric detail to William Shakespeare. There was a wonderful crossover between the two. But Anything Goes is as joyous as any musical that I have ever been involved with, and it used to take the roof off in this building. And being in the Littleton, when demographically you know that the audience has come from all over, from every kind of background, and where everything goes up at the end, where everybody in the building is standing and cheering, and therefore completely unified, just makes you believe that it's all worthwhile.
In the Olivier, you mean? Because it was here.
Sorry, did I say?
Yeah.
Yes.
But also,
What did I say?
You said Littleton, but we used to
Sorry,
all
in the Olivier.
crowd in the back. Matinee days were nuts because everybody would leave their offices and fill the back of all three stalls, entrances.
Yeah.
And I remember the last time I sat here talking to you was about 10 years ago, and I said to you, is the last 10 minutes of Act One the greatest moment of theatre ever? And you said, yes, probably. So I hope you still
I'm afraid I'm a stuck record in that case.
Absolutely,
I apologize.
absolutely. And indeed, it was joyous, absolutely joyous. It's great. I would certainly include Summerfolk, and I would include Little Night Music as in mine. So I'm in very, very good company here for those.
Well, I really would have cited Anything Goes in my 3, and then I thought, but I absolutely loved your Oklahoma as well, and absolutely. And then I thought, oh dear, no, I'll miss them out altogether because it would have looked gratuitous if I'd been choosing one of yours.
Well, there's too many
but
to
then,
choose on.
you know, before that there was Nick's wonderful production of Carousel, and before that there was Richard's wonderful production of Guys and Dolls.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that the great American musicals started during my time. It was, you know, and we've been talking about Sondheim in this building. You know, Sweeney Todd as well. There was a long history of the great musical shows here, and I'm happy that we contributed to that history.
And Light Princess has just opened new musicals, so we're carrying on, hopefully. Yeah. Thank you both so much for sharing. We carry on this journey tomorrow. David Hare and Penelope Wilton will be here to share their national histories with us. Really lovely to have both of you back for this, and thank you so much for joining us. So Trevor Nunn, Patricia Hodge.
Thank you, Angus.
Thank you.